Hey everyone, good morning. This is RJ. I'm your host. This is Amuse News. We are today bringing you a special conversation. If you're watching, you can see our guest here. If you're listening, I guess I'll just say, Basu, can you just introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Basu Ratnam, native New Yorker, and I'm the founder and CEO of INDAY restaurants.
Awesome, and thank you for taking time to talk today. I was going to be up in New York yesterday, and kids and life got in the way, but I'm glad we're able to talk. I'm excited to come visit at some point. I wanted to ask. I think you have at this point you have 8 in-day restaurants
We
in
do, yep. We have
close
eight
to.
and opening a ninth and 10th in the next couple months. So,
I guess I wanted to just start with like, how you started this concept and also how you use this kind of cuisine to scale, and like how scalable do you feel like, a concept. I feel like you have fat kind of fast casual and sit down restaurants in different locations, so you're kind of pursuing two different things. But I guess let's just start with the basics, which is like what gave you the idea to even start this restaurant group or this idea.
sure. As I said, I'm a native New Yorker, but born and raised in Long Island, right outside the city. But my parents are both, 100% ethnically and culturally Indian, and so very much a first generation kid. And growing up in Long Island, my parents did the best they could to try to assimilate us, but at the same time wanted to hold on to as much of their cultural heritage as they could. And so I grew up eating really the combination of like Indian ingredients and flavors, but my mom was always sort of inspired by, I think, California cuisine and thinking about sort of new American and seasonal produce driven food. And so I grew up with this really interesting kind of flavor profile and sense of the cuisine, which was really rooted in health and wellness and vitality, and sort of thinking about food as a source of energy. And I ended up going to college studying business, worked in finance for a few years after school, and was really inspired by what I was seeing happening in the fast casual space. It was probably midstream at that point, but you started seeing Chipotle's everywhere, and there was Sweet Greens popping up, and Kava, and all these different iterations of making a traditional cuisine a little bit more accessible and friendly and easy to eat, easy to order, healthful, flavorful, exciting, etc. And I felt like Indian food was not really well represented in that sort of scene, and I felt like Indian food was very, everyone knows or has an opinion about Indian food, and a lot of people's opinion of that food is kind of stuck in a certain time capsule, and I felt like that was an interesting challenge to try and take on. So that was kind of the long answer to it, but it came from there, sort of seeing what was happening in the market and seeing that there was this really big opportunity to change the way people think about the cuisine.
Yeah, and I guess thanks for explaining that. And I know that you have a kind of combination of business and food background, so you kind of look at it from both those perspectives. And I guess from the business perspective, like I guess in growing up in New York City, you were surrounded by every kind of food. So maybe for you, like seeing the scalability of Indian food is different than if you grew up where I grew up in the Midwest, where we had like one Indian restaurant and that was it within
Yeah.
50 miles. Um, do you see like the timing and the opportunity for this particular idea as being like, is it sort of evergreen, or do you feel like it's a particular time where like Indian cuisine can maybe become, I guess, more scalable, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, sure. I think when you say scalable, you're saying on the demand side, can we get enough
Yeah,
people in the
yeah,
restaurants? I, it's interesting. I'll tell you a story I've repeated a couple times now, but it really was eye opening for me. So first of all, yes, I believe Indian food is delicious. It's flavorful. It's healthful. It's exciting. I think it has a lot of similar attributes to other ethnic cuisines that have taken over. I just think the way it's been represented in this country is, as I said, sort of stuck in a time capsule. But that's changing. I think, I think that if you were to have said that Korean barbecue was going to take off, or sushi even, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, those would have felt like very foreign things growing up in the Midwest. But I think, the there's great food everywhere now. I think there's an appetite and a curiosity for ethnic cuisines, in a way that's just different than even it was when we started 8 years ago. People want spicier, they want more ethnic, they want more creative, they want more, more customization options. But I'll tell you a funny story. I was sitting at a conference a few months ago, and I went to be to be an attendee of the conference because the CEO of Kava and Danny Meyer were both speaking, and I just wanted to hear what they had to say. And I accidentally checked the box when I was RSVPing to the conference that said that I was willing to sit down and host investor interviews, which I wasn't prepared to do.
Uh-huh.
And so I get to the conference. I have 11 interviews back to back to back set up. I went to the conference host, and I said, I'm sorry, I'm not dressed. I'm not prepared. I didn't mean to do this. And they said, no, they actually wanted to sit down with you. And I was like, what? And all these investors said the same thing, which was 20 years ago, if you looked at supermarket data and you were studying the spins and the velocity and shelf space and growth, et cetera, you would have seen that tortilla chips and salsa and guacamole were exploding. And if you were really smart, you might have guessed that Chipotle was going to become a national brand. And if you did the same thing 10 years ago, you would have seen that Greek yogurt, pita chips, hummus, tahini are exploding. And if you were a little bit smarter, you'd see that Cabo and Mediterranean food was going to take over. And now that same growth and sort of velocity and excitement and, the breaking apart of the ethnic aisle is happening in Indian food. And so it's an exciting time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you just talk about this, like the concept of food karma? I mean, you talked about how the food is, nutritious and like basically what are you trying to communicate and give customers through this idea of food karma? Because it seems like that's like a slightly different take than, just fresh ingredients or whatever that take is.
Sure. When I think about food karma, as I mentioned, I grew up in a home where Indian food was thought of as, a part of your life, a part of your spirituality, a part of your healthfulness. And I think that's very endemic to the way people think about Indian food. What people don't realize is that the same philosophy that created yoga also created a cuisine. And that is that food can improve your sense of balance. It can connect your mind, body, and spirit. And so when we think about our food, we think about it, in that lens, from the way that we source, the way that we combine ingredients, the way that we think about even the energy we try to put in when we cook the food. We have good karma on the top of every one of our doors. We think, starting your day with intention. We think that, beginning within, setting a sense of ritual to your cooking, to the way that you treat your teams, the way you treat your body, the ingredients you put into the food, all that stuff we think is positive energy that I think is good, and it makes you feel good. It makes the food taste better, in our opinion, and hopefully it gives you a little bit more lift throughout the rest of your day. So food karma is that in a nutshell. It's just this idea of how much of an honor we think it is to be able to serve food to people.
That's really cool. Thanks for explaining that. I guess you have this like the sit down concept and the fast casual concept both under INDAY, and I assume that will continue. Maybe like how do you balance between two really different kinds of restaurants? Really?
Yeah, sure. So in a lot of ways, the sit down restaurant was born out of almost, it felt like a little bit like necessity. We were, it was 2021. All of our restaurants, we had 5 restaurants up until that point. They were all based in Manhattan, all in the base of office buildings. And people just were not coming back to work in a way that could even justify, we were doing what we used to do in an hour, we were doing in a day in terms of sales. It was frightening for a really long time. That there was COVID, there was Omicron, there was all these different waves, and there was so much uncertainty about the return to office. And I always felt like Indian food, if you just repackaged the cuisine a little bit, the dining room a little bit, offered a really delicious and wonderful beverage option, that we could serve people in a neighborhood setting with more of a dinner emphasis. And so we did that because I thought we were leaving something on the table, and I thought we had more to contribute to sort of the culinary landscape, but also out of necessity, because I just didn't know when fast casual and the office lunch business, which was the primary foundation of our business up until that point, was ever going to come back. And so that's the why. The kind of how, or will we continue? It's been not without challenges. We have a pretty good understanding of how to run the fast casuals, and the full service business is its own little beast. We thought we understood restaurants. It turns out we understand fast casual restaurants much better. And so it's almost its own little business within the business that honestly I get a tremendous amount of joy from. I love to go be a sort of innovator in that restaurant and think about new menu ideas and think about the guest experience and have a little bit more time to create a special moment for our guests that you don't get to see in the fast casual. But it is much more different than it is the same. And the interesting thing is, if you looked at our P mix, which is the kind of the receipt of all of our sales. So if you look at the items people order, if you took the top 5 items from the full service versus the top 5 items from the fast casual, they're almost identical. So it's people are eating the same food. We're using almost the exact same ingredients, same recipes, but the operation and the front of house and the steps of service and the way that we want to curate experiences are very different, and our kind of business foundation in one doesn't apply to the other.
Got it. Yeah, that's cool. And so I got to ask, because I love Indian food, and like I said, I wanted to be there in person, and I will come to one of the locations soon. When people come in, or you're talking about the restaurant, what are 1 or 2 things that you're like, you absolutely have to try X or Y?
Yeah, sure. So we do, first of all, our number one selling dish is chicken tikka masala, which
Mm-hmm.
we put
Mm-hmm.
on the menu during COVID, actually, but we didn't sell it prior to that. And
Oh, wow.
it's our number one seller. It shot up to the top of the charts and it stayed there, and it's in every restaurant. So I'd say that's our most popular dish. And we do a delicious combination that is kind of, we took a recipe from New Delhi, and which is a city in India, and this really famous chef that sort of coined the dish. So I definitely recommend that. And then we also have a really sort of lighter and brighter curry, which to me kind of encapsulates a lot of what we're trying to do with the food, which is our golden curry. And it's a turmeric based curry that's healthful. It feels really like fresh, and it's crunchy and crispy and a little spicy. And so I think if you try those two, you'll see kind of the cuisine that we were born out of, and where we're trying to take the cuisine. And it's a good parallel.
Nice. Well, I know we don't have a ton of time, but I wanted to ask, where do you see this going? Like, where do you see INDAY future? I don't know, 2 or 3 years down the road.
Sure. Well, we're opening up our first national market, or new national market, in Boston, either later this year or first part of 2025. So we hope to kind of fill in the distance between those 2 cities, New York and Boston. But in a couple of years, we started this to be a national brand. At the time when I first opened our first restaurant, there were no Indian national brands, and now we're starting to see them all over the place, mostly in consumer packaged goods and some fashion brands. And it's India, the wave of Indian products and items are coming, but there still isn't a national fast casual brand, and that's always been the sort of aspiration for us and for our team. And I hope in a few years we'll be in many more markets, and we're not going to stop until we can stop filling seats. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you talked about Kava, Sweet Green, the Chipotle, obviously, and other kind of Mexican-inspired fast casual. Like, there really isn't a national brand for Indian. And do you think it's just like hasn't had the right kind of approach and people behind it, or do you think that it's a timing thing?
I think it's both. I think fast casual is extremely hard. It's harder in a lot of ways than people give it credit for, especially now. Because you have price sensitivity, you have wage sensitivity, you have all these different technological forces disrupting you. So I think it's part of it has been around execution and brand positioning. And I think part of it was, to your point, you can't, just because something is delicious or it tastes good or it makes sense in New York, you can't force it down people's throats. And I think that Indian culture and the Indian diaspora, the population is in a place where people seem to be embracing it in a lot more of a fashion. And I think, if you look at yoga and the way that has taken off in this country, people don't think of it as Indian calisthenics. They think of it as an exercise and unto itself. And I kind of think that's where the food needs to go, where it's not Indian food that you remember that, it's going to make you sick or give you deli belly or whatever these, crazy myths are. It's just going to be really delicious products in a brand that resonates with people. And like I said, I think people are more curious now. And the Indian diaspora, we have a half Indian vice president. There's just a lot more visibility for Indian culture than there's ever been.
That's really cool. Well, I wanted to tell everyone you can check out INDAY, INDAY, allday.com to check out all the locations and the by the way, like just the the photos and the presentation of all the food on the on the website is great. I feel like that's a good the marketing behind it is clearly like very clean and really appealing. So it seems like that's a big part of kind of growing something like this. But I'm really looking forward to trying the food, and I appreciate you taking the time to chat for a few minutes.
Thank you so much for having me on. I love your show and what you guys do, and I can't wait to meet in person. I'd love to have you in one of the restaurants.
That's awesome. All right, thank you, Basu. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll be back with another episode tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you.